Hello, and welcome to the Rollwise podcast, your show where we talk about things related to tabletop RPGs. This week, we dive into quite this special Kickstarter. As you guys know, we like to look at Kickstarters here and there, and there's been some rumbling in the background that Brandon Sanderson was going to be launching his Stormlight Archive game through Kickstarter on August 6th. And what he did was not only launch the Stormlight Archive RPG on there, but he actually launched the Cosmere Role Playing game, which is an expansive, huge, multi-world setting with rules and systems and stuff that are all based on the worlds that he's been building over the ever so many years that he's been writing books. And it is absolutely crushed Kickstarter numbers. And I think it's worth talking about. So with that as kind of the premise, let's go ahead and get into this. The first thing that I want to talk about is I'm going to bring up the Kickstarter just because it's like an important thing to see, is that this thing has been absolutely, and I hate to use that stupid stock meme, but this feels like it went to the moon. I don't think I've personally ever seen something that has been, 2 days in and reached $6 million ever.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the comic book sites, right, posted that it is officially the largest tabletop role-playing game Kickstarter ever.
At least to start. I know it's because Avatar Legends is what I think holds the record right now at $9 million total raised over the period. But I don't think
for the start.
Yeah, I don't.
This is gonna crush 9 million if it's at 6.1 in 2 days.
Yeah, and as of obviously we're watching this, the money still keeps on climbing based on the pledges that people are making. So I have to say that I was watching, when we were watching DC 20 and kind of that really exciting, like how is everything exploding? I thought that was going fast. I mean,
it did. It did.
And they've already dwarfed MCDM. Like they're already $2 million over what MCDM made out of their whole.
Yeah, we watched both of those campaigns, which were impressive. They're impressive campaigns.
Yeah, and it's weird to see that people just like come to this and it just like exploded so much from this.
Well, but it's honestly a lot of it is the scale of publishing books. Right. Yeah. Sanderson's reader base might be it's huge.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's obviously bigger than most role-playing games have. That's tabletop role-playing games is of a certain size. And I don't know the size, the estimated size of the hobby. And, that doesn't make it good or bad. It's a smaller hobby compared to, say, reading.
It's true. So this is what I think is kind of interesting to me about this this Kickstarter, because first and foremost, you guys as well as I, when we were looking at it, because we'd heard about the Stormlight Archive RPG coming out from Brandon Sanderson, so it perked our ears up, because I've read some Sanderson. I think Jeff, you've read some Sanderson. I don't think Brenda's got as much exposure to him. But when I've read Sanderson, but that ironically enough, I've never read any of the Stormlight Archive or Mistborn or any of those things. I've read like Skyward and the Reckoners. So, I have a very different experience reading Sanderson stuff. And Jeff, what was your experience reading Sanderson's?
I've read one of the Mistborn books, and I really liked it. I just haven't gotten back around to picking up more of them. But most of my exposure was through the Wheel of Time series that he finished for Robert Jordan. He co-wrote 1 or 2 with him, and then finished 3 or 4. I don't remember however it worked out, but he was handpicked by Robert Jordan to finish the Wheel of Time and collaborated with him, and then later Jordan's widow, who had all of the material. And I actually thought the Wheel of Time might be my favorite, fantasy series ever. It's certainly the longest one that I've ever read at 14 books. Yeah. There's longer ones out there, but I really like his writing. I like the way he builds worlds. Even, playing in Robert Jordan's, like, you can tell he was trying to write
like Robert Jordan,
like Robert Jordan, but there were parts of Sanderson. There are things in those later books that weren't necessarily present, and it's just they're two different authors, right?
Yeah,
like it's hard to keep everything out. But I really like the way the Wheel of Time, wrapped up and finished up, and I know that he was using a lot of notes and plot lines from Jordan, but I like his writing style. The Mistborn book I read was really good.
And I think you should give yourself more credit, Jeff. Wheel of Time for page count might be the longest fantasy novel, because those books are enormous. Like there's 14 of them, and they're all what?
No, they're big.
1,500 pages of like tiny print over the course of thin paper.
Yeah, they're not as big as. Oh god, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say, because I have them actually all back on my bookshelf back here. But it's funny because it was back in the day when you'd actually pick up a fantasy novel and you almost were like, oh, this has got to be a good fantasy novel. It's the size of a big brick, like
right. It's literally a brick. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of world building, and it's interesting to me because like the first time I tried to read Stormlight Archive a while ago. I don't know when, but based on a friend of ours recommendation, I was like, oh, I should read the Stormlight Archive just to kind of jump into this Sanderson fantasy stuff. And what I thought it was hard for me to get into at the time, because the first book of the Sanderson thing, it was very much a lot of world building. And since I like to listen to books on audio, it was very confusing for me just to kind of because I couldn't just tone it out, and kind of just work, like do dishes while I was working on it, because I like to listen to a book while I'm doing chores or something like that. And I couldn't really do that because there was just so much vocabulary about the world that I just didn't understand. And so it would cause me to break and be like, what the hell did I just listen to? What the hell is a spren? Like, what is going on? And then I would rewind and it would just be like, oh, there's a spren. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And so, and actually in talking with this friend later, kind of mentioned that, when talking about like the Stormlight Archive and everything like that, he mentioned that first book is a lot of setup, because he's basically decided to give you a world that wasn't, it wasn't super Lord of the Rings, Tolkien-esque fantasy. It was kind of a deviation and kind of wanted to do his own thing. And I feel like that's really cool, because when you look at Cosmere, just as a general principle, I guess I'm surprised that somebody hasn't tried to tackle this as a setting for any of the big games up until this point. That's actually really impressive that there's still a trove like this of setting, a setting that's like this big and this well developed, that's still waiting for a tabletop RPG to play in, if that makes any sort of sense. Like, I'm actually trying to think of other big worlds that exist out there, fantasy or sci-fi, that somebody hasn't tried to put a tabletop RPG to.
Well, I mean, the big properties are mostly taken. I think really the thing is that Sanderson seems to keep pretty tight rein on his IP, and so it's really probably up to him and about when he wanted to do it. But yeah, most big IPs have some sort of role-playing game these days, it seems.
Yeah. So looking at kind of the rest, like kind of getting into the Kickstarter and everything like that. If anybody is interested in backing the Kickstarter, they have a few different levels of pledge and everything. People say that, this is one of those ones where it does seem as though the cost of these books, it doesn't feel as though it's like super expensive unless you just look at the basic pledge levels. Because if you look at the pledge levels, there was a little bit of sticker shock for me to go and basically look at the e-reader where I can get two PDFs for $60, and I was like, $30 a piece. That's kind of expensive. Getting into the player bundle was like $200. Getting into the Game Master bundle was $300, and I don't think it's like outside of other Kickstarters and all that kind of stuff. It just felt like kind of right out of the gate. There wasn't really like a good entry level price that I saw. And I was actually curious as to your guys' thought. Like when you saw other games, like I felt like every other game other than the MCDM one had like a buy this book to play level at whatever it is. And maybe that is at the $30. You can just get one book and kind of know, but
Well, yeah, I mean, you can a la carte some stuff, right? If you just do add-ons only. But the reader level at 95 is 2 hardcover books that I'm assuming are going to wind up in the 300 to 400 page range for $95, which is less than 50 a book. Now you do have to, it's Kickstarter, so you have to add shipping, right? There's always a shipping charge because these things are heavy. But the 2 books for 95 I don't think is bad, and I'm assuming that these are full-size books.
You also get one of them as a PDF.
Yeah, so I didn't think that was bad, but the $385 collector's edition. It's a lot of minis and a lot of dice, man.
And they're hardcover. The $95. The 2 hardcover core books plus a PDF. It's 1 PDF. I feel
it says matching PDFs included. So you should get both of them.
Oh yeah, any 1 core book and matching PDF. So you can get 2. Yeah. So two of any core book. Yeah. Okay. So you get your 2 core books. It's worded a little weird. You get your 2 core books and then the PDF corresponding to that. Which for $95, that's not terrible.
Okay. Yeah. It just
for a hardcover.
I don't know. For some reason, it always felt like for Kickstarter that I don't know. I felt like Kickstarter would have a lower price on some of this stuff, but maybe I'm just I obviously am not the Kickstarter person, so like I backed things at higher levels because I've been really invested in just a very small number of games on Kickstarter. But it is interesting to me that like when you look at it, the enthusiasm for the people being in here is that a lot of people have really gone with the collector edition, being actually one of the largest pools of backers on here because they just wanted the dice, they wanted the figures, they wanted the pop out stuff. And Brotherwise Games, the people that are publishing this, actually, it's my understanding this is kind of their first foray into the big tabletop scene, but they have a background in board games and everything like that. So those kind of extras seem like that's kind of right up their alley to be able to produce those in kind of like side by side with the game and everything like that. And I believe Sanderson used Brotherwise to publish some of his other minis or stuff like that in the past. So I think that when you look at it, if it's not, it doesn't seem like it's too crazy. And I think if you were to actually do the math on today's, like if you wanted to buy the D&D PHB plus the monster manual plus the DMG and everything like that for the 2024 game that's coming up.
Didn't they offer those for 165 or something?
Yeah,
3 of them.
Was it 165? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was one.
That was like $55 a book.
Yeah, and that's just the books. Like it looks like at 195.
They don't really give you PDFs. Yeah,
you get quite a bit more. So I don't know. I think it's comparable, but it is always a sticker shock when you see get on Kickstarter because I think one of the things that's a shock is like you're paying for it, then you won't see it for a year. You're paying for hopes and dreams to a degree because if something goes wrong. As I always say, there's still Kickstarters that I funded pre-COVID that I still haven't got. Like I still get updates, but Hey
Brent, they all really appreciate that interest-free loan you gave them.
They do, exactly. I hope I get the book someday. But yeah, so that's the thing. Like that's one thing about the sticker shock is that's that moment where you're like, oh, I'm paying for nothing right now. So yeah, I kind of get that, but you'll get the PDF early probably.
Yeah. Well, and right now it's already in beta, and I think we'll talk about what's on Demiplane and what the PDF and everything like that offers. But the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is the one thing I've been paying more attention to are like the stretch goals and everything, because when you look at this one, this is where I think you start to get into that discussion of like, is this just a really fancy pre-order or is this an actual like Kickstarter thing? And what was interesting about MCDM is that they were like, we want people to invest in our idea of a new game, or I guess we should be calling it Dragonsteel. We want people to invest in our idea of a game, which will be someday known as Dragonsteel. And so we want a lot of money up front. And they asked for quite a bit of money up front. I think it was didn't they ask for like $800,000 just to kind of like make sure that they could actually complete the project? Because the project was maybe conceived and hashed out to a degree, but it wasn't like a game, right? They didn't have everything all done.
It felt like they needed the money to be able to fund the continued development.
Yep.
Like to get enough people to do it the right way. Like I'm not
Well, I think
disparaging.
I think one of the things that he said is like we wanted to make sure people wanted the game before we put it all together, basically.
Yeah. But
whereas this is a publishing company.
Yeah.
So the feeling is yeah, this is probably more of a pre-order.
And I was actually I was kind of actually surprised that there weren't better stretch goals. I mean, because I know that like when we were watching the DC-20 thing, like all the stretch goals were getting hit like so quickly, you know, like expanding adventures, adding extra things, adding additional functionality. They were getting hit so quickly that Coach was like, I got to keep typing and unlocking stuff. Whereas like here, you know, you really only had 3 stretch goals that I can see. Maybe more will be added later. But
maybe, well, it honestly feels to me like all of this was planned. I mean, they had demi-plane integration on launch, right? They had other VTT stuff near launch or on launch.
Yeah, they had Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds.
Yeah, they had been working, you know, with those companies months in advance. So I think all of this was always planned. Like it's a different scale. It's a different way to do it, right? They're not going to include more character classes, or they're not going to include VTT integration. They're not going to try to develop their own VTT. And there's nothing wrong with those other things as stretch goals, but it's just a different type of campaign. Like this was an all in, and then we're going to include, you know, some nice things, right? We're going to give you the art book, which is okay. Everybody gets a plot die. Let's hand out the plot dies. And then, you know, we're gonna pretty up the books.
Yeah, they're gonna give the gilded page edges and ribbon bookmark.
The spot UV covers and the gilded pages, they look great.
Yeah. It's true, and honestly, it is true. And I have to say that, you know, like not being a super, like, I guess, super knowledgeable about Sanderson and everything like that, it was interesting to kind of get a little bit of background into him, because one of the things that they did is they actually decided to put their beta on Drive-Thru-RPG. And that's one thing that I would strongly suggest people, if they're interested in the game, go look at and just download the beta, because it is a core amount of rules. At least the beta that I downloaded does not have any character generation stuff in it. That was going to be more saved for what's on Demiplane, I guess, instead of the beta rules preview that they're offering to people. They included an adventure called Bridge 9 that if people are interested in watching us play it, let us know. We could get characters together and we could use the pre-generated that they have to run through their scenario. And there's also a zine called Chasm Fiend. My understanding is that you could actually get it at Gen Con when they were there earlier, but this is basically, it's just 22 pages. You know, it's got like articles, information about the game, a little bit of background, and it actually has an interview with Sanderson himself to talk about like, well, this is where he started, and I was really surprised from the interview that they had. Do you guys want to guess what he said his first RPG was in this?
No idea.
Didn't you already tell us it was Dungeons and Dragons?
No, I said he played those games, but he had a first RPG, like we all do. And the first RPG that he ever played, according to this interview, was Teenage Mutant Turtles by Palladium Games.
That's not really that big of a sense.
Or was it a knockoff?
What's that?
No, it was a license. That was a licensed Palladium game. Yep.
And then apparently that really got him into the other Palladium games. You know, he played Beyond the Supernatural. And it's funny because I didn't see Rifts on the list, though.
That's because he didn't want to admit to it, probably.
He did mention the whole gamut, so maybe it was in there at some point. You know, like apparently a lot of the games that he played a lot of Palladium Fantasy, then AD&D and all that stuff. But I thought that was kind of neat to hear his, you know, like where did he start in games, and to have it not be D&D was kind of an interesting thing for me. So just kind of reading some of the other interview stuff that they had, when you're looking at the game rules themselves, the game rules are definitely heavily influenced by D20 systems. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I feel like people are very very opinionated about D20 systems lately. Is that just me, or is that just because I've been looking at it?
Opinionated in what sense?
Well, some people basically will go, D20 games are, kind of are easy for people to learn. They can provide some depth for the old school players and all that kind of stuff if they want to. And that other people are like, D20 games are like hot garbage and they're the worst skeleton to build a game on. So, and I was
let's talk to the elephant in the room. The only reason anybody is making a D20 game is because that is the system that Dungeons and Dragons uses, which is the largest player in the industry. So if you want to steal from their player base, you put out a system that feels familiar to those people.
Yeah. Well, also it's like, I'm not going to say it's not easy. It's easy because like there's a lot of rules to the D20 systems that people have to do, but it's less intimidating because it's one dice. It's not a pool system where it's like, hey, take this number, now collect that many dice, now roll sixes, or something like that. It's like, okay, roll your D20. Okay, that's add your modifier. Okay, you beat the target number, you get to do something now. So I mean, and everyone and you kind of have everyone's heard about D&D and everyone's heard about rolling a D20, even people not in the gaming space. So it comes down to a familiarity, and so that's why it's probably good to build a game around it to some degree, because if you're trying to get new people, which I'm assuming some of the people that have helped raise $6 million on Kickstarter probably don't play role-playing games. They've probably bought the game because they like they like the property, the IP, the world.
Yeah.
And so you want them, given if they're going to give it a try, you want it to make it something that's at least remotely familiar or something that's easy to pick up. And I think D20 is like just that one die, just being able to say roll that one die is a strong selling point. And the reason that people say it's a bad skeleton usually is because D20 is really swingy. Like it's not. It's like you're going to fail almost as often as you're going to succeed, depending. So, like, it's really swingy. So that makes balancing things hard in combats and stuff like that, which is all stuff we talked about before. But like to get new people into the game and draw some existing D&D players into a world that they want to play in, D20 is like probably the best option. So,
yeah. Well, and it's true. I think that there's probably pros to con to anything, and I feel like people, and this is something, we've learned over the last little bit, is that whenever you see your favorite game person, your game personality or something like that, invest into a game, it feels like it's a lot less likely that they're going to be doing something so innovative that they're just going to be like, oh, we just blew it open and created a whole bunch of rules that no one's ever considered in an RPG before. It's always going to be like, well, how do I like to play games? Okay, well, these are my favorite rules that I've ever played with in any game whatsoever. And I'm going to find a way to kind of like, start to put the puzzle together so that it plays with all of my favorite rule sets. And so, when I was looking over the rules themselves, like I said, you guys, anybody that wants to download it can go to DriveThruRPG to get a copy of the beta preview, at least for right now. And I mean, it seems as though there's some basic stuff. Obviously they have 6 stats. They have, they have stats that people in D&D are going to feel familiar with, although some of them are going to be, a little bit different because they're going to be like, there's no such thing as con. I don't think I saw con. There's going to be like willpower and awareness. So there's going to be some labels that are different and some changes that you as a player are going to have to adapt to if you've already established a D&D legacy in how you played, but that isn't hard. The things that are going to be more interesting for you to think about are going to be the plot die. That is going to be something that I feel is it's the little piece that probably is going to set the game apart from a lot of other D20 stuff. And I was curious as to your guys' take. Like, do you feel like having a dice that change it? Because like obviously you have a D20 and that kind of tells you if you succeed or fail. And even on the D20 in this game, you get opportunities if you roll a 20 and complications if you roll 1. But having an additional dice that provides additional opportunities for complications or successes and stuff like that. Do you like that kind of narrative feel in the game, or what is your guys' take?
I mean, I don't think it's innovative, really. I mean, a lot of games do it. So I don't necessarily feel it's innovative, but I don't think this game's necessarily trying to be innovative because it's a kind of a mainstream game. I think they're just trying to be narrative, and I think that adds to the being able to have a dice that, however often you use it, having a dice that kind of gives you narrative prompts. I mean, that's always good. And again, it kind of qualifies something that GMs you kind of do off the top of their head anyways. It gives for new people, it gives like an obvious set of circumstances where you can throw, additional narration and flavor into the thing, which I think is always good.
Yeah. And it's interesting because in this case, in case anybody's wondering about the terminology, they call it raising the stakes, and the GM can raise the stakes. But what was also neat is that players can raise the stakes too. I believe that there are certain player abilities that can allow you to raise stakes and all those kind of things. And there are certain situations where the plot die actually help a scene play through like an event and all that kind of stuff. So it is used in a few ways that I haven't personally played with before. So that'll be kind of neat for us to see if we decide to give it a go with the game. Not to say that every rule is going to be showcased in there, but I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to see down the road. Jeff, what about you? Plot dice, having the success with complication, failure with opportunity. Where do you stand on that?
I'm with Brent. There's more opportunities for storytelling. I have not disliked those type of mechanics in any of the games that we've played that use them. It does make things narratively more interesting. It makes things more cinematic. It makes things more literary, if you will. I think cinematic is the term I fall on more often. But you can technically succeed at something, but then also cause a complication, right? We see it all the time as a plot device. I think it makes for better storytelling. And so having a mechanism to do that. Now there are GMs, DMs, whoever's mastering, whatever you're playing, who do that naturally, right? Depending on the role. But the two interesting ones are failing, but then getting something, some part of the failure winds up working out in your favor, or succeeding, but then there's an additional complication or consequence or whatever C term they use. Do you know what I mean? I think it makes for better storytelling. Sorry, it's long-winded. I like those types of mechanics in games. Now, whether the plot dice is the best way to manifest that, I don't know, but it is a mechanic that's included in the game to help make the narrative storytelling stronger. Go ahead, Brent.
I think one thing that's cool about it is it'll do that thing that we talk about in Critical Role all the time, where like the special dice roll moment where like they pull out the box and like present it. Like if you use it like they suggest I think you said it's like 30% in the book. If you use it like 1/3 or less, like being like, okay, I want you to roll that dice, but I want you to roll it with, I want you to raise the stakes on that dice roll. Like that'll make it feel special and like it's important, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Because there's a certain tension that's built with the idea that you're like, oh well, you're doing something that definitely the party needs right now, but a complication could be really interesting for me if you happen to get it. Or there could be a way that you benefit the party that I can try to use later or something like that. And I thought I do like it. And I think for new GMs or people that are from the D20 world where kind of the answer is binary. Oh, do you know this about do you know the dragon's name? No. Okay. You just fail.
It's just a no. It's fine. Move on.
Yeah, and so it's like, I mean, if you can roll an unlimited number, you don't make them roll. But if you just want to have that pass-fail mentality, I personally have found that to be a lot more boring in games lately, where you just like, oh, you just fail. Okay, moving on. What's next?
Well, yeah. I mean, binary results and plus it makes it harder as a GM if you're trying to make things interesting by make things interesting at all. Yeah.
Plot hooks hidden behind the door that they now can't open.
Which you should never do.
You should never do. Right. It's not good storytelling. It's not good GMing.
Yeah. Oh, it might be good storytelling, but it's going to make your story difficult for you if you're trying to DM that way.
Yeah. Well,
you listen at the door for the villain. Okay, roll your dice. Nope, you don't hear anything. Okay, we move on to the next door.
the door is extra thick sounding.
Yeah.
One thing I did want to point out about the plot die that I thought was a little bit unique as opposed to other kind of narrative dice that I've seen in games is that if you roll a 1 or a 2, those are your complications, but they give you a bonus to the test. So they offset the complication just by giving you a bonus to the test. So you're more likely to do whatever you were attempting to accomplish, but you get that complication that goes along with it. So if you roll a 1, you get a bonus 2, and if you roll a 2, you get a bonus 4. So that was something that I hadn't actually seen before in a game. Not to say
no, it's a nice twist. Increase. Yeah. I somebody can do the math, but it increases your percentage chance to succeed on whatever you're doing, right?
It's true. It's true. Like true.
What is the bonus? What is it?
Either 2 or 4.
Plus 2 or plus 4 to your roll.
2 is 10% because 1 is 5%.
So 4 is 20.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. What else did we have that were
which is technically a lot, but when you roll like me, it never feels like it.
Well, when you're 80% below the target, 20% is not going to help.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was actually, so a couple other things I think were interesting about it is that when you're looking at like the initiative, I had to laugh just a little bit because you know how we did that, we had that initiative discussion and everything like that, is that they decided that, we were like, oh, there's way more initiative out there than I possibly could remember. And one of the things that it seems like is that when you're in combat and everything like that, they actually decided to go with that speed sandwich. Do you remember that from the initiative where there's like a fast turn, an NPC turn, and then a slow turn? They adjusted a little bit. And so basically you elect to go when you want in this process. So as the PC, you get the choice, which I always find is interesting when you enable the players to decide how you want to do it. But by going first, you offset that by only getting 2 actions each when you're in that fast PC turn. There is a fast NPC turn that goes directly after you. And then anybody that's elected to take a slow turn, they get 3 actions each to kind of offset the fact that they let the NPCs go ahead of them. So I do like that. Obviously, having looked at initiatives, that was one I hadn't played with in the past, and so I'd be curious to see how that plays in actual gameplay and everything like that. But I was weird that I could be like, oh, we're gonna pull out the speed sandwich.
Oh, I know how that works.
I read about that recently. It was so strange to see it actually just like kind of come up and play, and I was like, oh, neat.
What did they actually call it? They didn't call it a speed sandwich. Did they give it a name?
Who?
The Stormlight, did they give it or Cosmere, did they give it a name, their initiative system?
They just called it a sequence. They didn't call it a name. They just say the order of combat.
The order of combat.
I do like speed sandwich. I don't know if this would be, because this isn't exactly like it, because it's not fast NPC slow. It's fast, slow.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's again, trying to make a new initiative system is like easiest way to make distinctions for your game. So they're not just going to call it that or pull it directly from somebody else. That's why they're going to tweak it a little bit and make it their own. Yeah. But
and so I thought that was interesting. The other thing that I thought was interesting is that people that are familiar with the terms advantage in this game, that if you get advantage in this, because you can be rolling up to 3 dice at once, basically the skill check, the plot die, and a damage die, you can actually apply advantage to any one of those dice. And so that can create for actual tactical dice rolling with the advantage that's a little bit more robust than I think 5th edition has. Because 5th edition is just like, oh, I attack with advantage, 2 dice, see what happens.
Right. Well, that's how most games that have the advantage mechanic are.
Yep. And so it's interesting that you can apply it to different types of dice when you're rolling it. But that was just kind of my
that actually is interesting. It does distinguish it a little bit.
Sure. So, I mean, did you guys see anything else that really jumped out at you from that?
I thought it might be a little more narrative and a little less crunchy, and it's pretty crunchy. It's as crunchy as Pathfinder or D&D, and that's without me diving into the magic system, which is the part of the rules that I really want to see. You know,
and I think
fleshed out.
Yeah, I think again, it's going to mirror D&D just because, and like I said, it is crunchy in the same sense D&D is, which isn't super crunchy.
Mhm.
It's definitely a little more crunchy than some of the other games we played recently. So
I'm not saying it's bad. Not if I would have guessed, I would have thought a little more storytelling, but it's very much in the vein of D&D and Pathfinder, I thought.
There was one other rule that I was reminded about that I thought was interesting is injury and death. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at that, but you can die from injuries.
You can.
You can die from injuries. So if you have an injury, you get a -5 from the roll. And this is something I don't see very often, but like to die from an injury, you have to roll a -6 or lower with modifiers. In D20 systems, I haven't really seen it go talk about what happens when you roll the negatives very often. Usually it's just like you can never roll lower than a 1.
No, D&D actually took that out. 3.5 and AD&D had a lot of like negative modifiers. You got negative modifiers for things, but I think it became like the kind of D&D philosophy to not throw negative numbers at Americans because it's hard for us. So that is interesting that they have negative modifiers. That's something that's been I believe I read somewhere that's been a philosophy change that they had, either going from AD&D to 3.5 or going from 3 to 4 and 5. I don't remember, but yeah. So that is interesting that they have. I mean, and that means if you get injured, your character falls. Your character falls in that spiral of death. It's like, oh, I'm hurt. I'm now worse at everything than I was before. So fighting might not be the answer anymore.
Yeah, because your injury effects do have carryover. So basically, your injury roll and everything like that dictates how long the duration for the injury is. And so if your injury duration is actually rolled at a -6 or lower, that's when you die, because that sucks. But you can have anything from just a remainder for the day all the way to a permanent injury if it happens to be a -5 to 0. And then the injury effects are anything from exhausted, that lowers your overall stamina by 1, exhausted 2, slow, disoriented. So you have a few different effects that can be applied during that time frame. But then of course, if you're looking at death or anything like that, I thought the way they did death was a little bit interesting as well. In so much as that, if you're taken to like 0 hit points, you're kind of unconscious. But if I read this correctly, you can kind of pop back up. You're like, I choose to come back with 1 hit point if I want to be really like gung-ho about it. There's obviously
realistically, if any of your characters, if your character is unconscious for more than 5 or 6 minutes, they're really angling more towards dead anyways.
It's true. but it's interesting because it always feels like in many of the other games that we play, like characters don't really get to control when they get back into the fight, right?
Right. It's usually a special ability. Like certain characters have an ability to say, I hop back up with one hit point or whatever.
Yeah. So so character death in this is treated fairly permanently, it seems like, but I just thought that was interesting that if you went down to 0 hit points, you were like, oh, well, I get back up. Yeah. You can, because it's like under the unconscious condition, you can choose to regain consciousness at the end of any of your turns, no action required, or when the effect heals you to at least 1 health. When you do so, other characters can sense you're conscious. You remove the unconscious condition, and if you're at 0 health, you recover 1 health. But be careful with such low level health, you could either suffer another injury. And so I think you're stacking injuries if you want to keep on popping back up.
Right. If you're in a bad situation, and
that -5 penalty per injury is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you decide to pop back up, it better be pretty dire circumstances.
Yeah.
Or somebody might be that person that's like, oh, they're unconscious?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I look forward to reading more and maybe trying to play the little scenario they have.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I feel like it's worth at least trying out because it's got enough, it's synthesizing enough rules from enough different systems that it could be a really great playthrough. just in terms of like how it represents high fantasy. I'm really curious about the world myself. I was actually surprised because it's like I'm not gonna lie, I didn't realize this, but there's a shit ton of Cosmere lore YouTube channels and articles and all that kind of stuff. It shouldn't come as a surprise to me, but I had no want for looking for Cosmere stuff on there. So I mean, if you want to learn about it, you obviously can learn about it through the game, where it seems like you can get a shit ton of, you can get a huge data dump from any number of other resources too. But that's another thing that's interesting, is that the RPG is going to be canonical to this setting. Did you guys read that?
I did. That's an interesting. It's interesting. It's Brandon Sanderson's world, and if any material created for the role playing game becomes canon, for the universe, I think it's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I mean, he's invested in this in a way that I think.
Yeah, it's not half-assed.
Yeah, it's and he didn't just like sign it over to someone to be like, oh, go make me money. Like I want to collect a fat check on this role playing game, so give me money, make good games if you want. It seems like he's been very invested in the entire process. I think he actually helped write the initial adventure or something.
Yeah, it seems like an impressive start. And I'm not just talking about the dollars. I'm talking about actually what they're showing us, the tabletop integrations, the virtual tabletop integrations, the content that I'm seeing, what they're trying to deliver on the Kickstarter. I think they're going to be good looking books. I hope that the content, lives up to the hype, because it looks kind of neat.
Yep, it does.
Yeah. So, with that being said, I don't know if any of us are simply the Kickstarter fans, or like I don't think any of us were Sanderson fans enough to just like jump on the Kickstarter in that first 24 hours. But we'll see. I mean, obviously we're going to be looking at the game. We might have a chance to play it before the Kickstarter wraps up, and maybe that we just go.
I've been told to pump the brakes on the board game Kickstarters, so I need to make sure that I'm not doing, adding, reducing column A and increasing column B.
That's true.
Tabletop role-playing game Kickstarters. I'm interested. I just don't know if I'm interested past, maybe the 95, the reader one. Yeah. I don't know. We'll have to see if we get a chance to play it before the Kickstarter ends. That would help. But I think it's going to be a quality product. I'm not concerned about that. It's how many fantasy role-playing systems do I want? And while I think that the world is really immersive and really cool, I'm not as invested in it as the 8,000 people that are shelling out $400 for the all-in pledge.
Right.
Yeah. Honestly, but this is something that I think needs to be said more often, is that if that helps new people get into the hobby and this is their entry point for it, I really hope they nail it just for that thing.
Oh, 100%.
Because if Sanderson was basically your gateway into the tabletop RPG hobby, and it became like, something that you did on the regular because of it, that in itself is so cool. Like I feel like there's so many people that would love to play these types of games and everything like that, but they just don't.
You're right. If this increases the player base by any amount, like any game that launches has a chance to do it, but this has a huge built-in fan base, and I don't think all of them play tabletop RPGs.
No,
some of them probably do.
I've already seen on Reddit people that are like, because there was a mega thread under the Cosmere subreddit.
Oh, I'm sure there was.
That was like, here, we're doing the Kickstarter. And there were people in the thing that are like, I'm a Sanderson fan, and I want to collect some of this stuff, and I might even want to play it, but I have no idea what the hell I'm looking at. What is going on with all these different books and all that stuff?
Sure.
And so people have been in the comments, people that are either the Kickstarter veterans or the tabletop RPG veterans that are like, oh, these are the kinds of books, and this is the kind of pledge package that you should build. And it's been really cool to see that community kind of help itself out to see those people that are interested, maybe, even as a collector, just to get the right type of stuff that they could have on their shelf.
The few times I've interacted with the Cosmere fan base, they've always been very inclusive, like open to questions, very, very willing to overwhelm you with an incredible amount of information. Like,
That's good.
Overwhelm me. How about that? I won't throw anybody else under the bus. Overwhelm me. A few times I've asked questions, but
yeah,
I have found it to be, one of the less toxic cases that I've interacted with.
Yeah, and we have some good friends that are definitely much harder harder fans in this, and they've been pretty excited about, at least I know one of them has been pretty excited about getting involved in this, and so maybe they'll be the one that gets the books and runs us through the game and all that. Never know. It'd be nice to jump in the player seat for that game, I guess. Yeah. I'd like to use a shard blade based on what I've read. It sounds pretty sweet. So
the shard blades are badass. That I know that. I mean, did you actually create a character on? Sorry, Mark, I'm not trying to change the subject. Go ahead and finish.
No. I haven't created a character on Demiplane.
I got squirrel brain as I'm looking at Demiplane here.
No. We could show people the Demiplane builder if you guys want, but I feel like that could be in itself its own video that we could go through. And
yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, maybe if people want to see it, they can put something in the comments and ask us to do a run through.
Mm-hmm. So this
or
is just
they can go to Demiplane themselves, get a free account, right?
Yep.
Test it out, see what it's like.
And so if you I think you get additional access according to this. If you get the enhanced digital book to your Kickstarter pledge, you can get enhanced access within Demiplane. Nice. So I guess this is where I like Demiplane for a lot of the character builder stuff, but it's not really a VTT. So if you're looking to run the adventures, you kind of have to use another virtual tabletop. And so I'm always curious as to how that integrates with like Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something else, or would you just use those instead? Because it does seem as though you could try Fantasy Grounds and Roll20 and have a similar character sheet that you could build out in those systems too. So we'll see. Okay, well then I think that's it for today. This is our RPG News Day. We talked about a Kickstarter that seems like it's blowing up on the scene, and we hope that you guys are excited about it. We're interested to hear your opinions. If you have played the playtest, let us know. If you're interested in us playing the test on stream, let us know. If you just want to say hi, say hi. We don't really care. We like to chat with you folks. So I think that's it, though. Jeff, how else can they talk with us if they're not talking with us in the comments?
They can find us on Facebook, Twitter, or Threads. We are at Rollwise. You can also email us, rollwiseguys@gmail.com.
And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us for our conversation at our table, both virtually. And as always, roll well, roll wise, and be safe out there.
See you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.